There's an old saying that prostitution is the oldest profession in the world. And you know what? There's probably a lot of truth to it. For this project, I'd like to look at how favorable or unfavorable people have viewed prostitution in the United States over the last 2.5 centuries. About as long as the United States has been a nation now. Originally, I'd assumed that as time goes on, people become more open-minded and progressive. However, the issue of prostitution doesn't appear to be this easy. Easy. So has prostitution become more accepted over the last 250 years? Or has our society pushed away from this practice? And the answer is yes. Yes. Yes, our society has both become more accepting and at the same time become more rejectful of the practice of sex work. Why is this? Is a really good question. A big part of it may come down to the fact that our nation is currently very divided at this moment. Half of our nation is kind of pushing towards a traditional and conservative side that keeps with puritanical principles, and they generally think about sex kind of in a way that's shameful. The other half of the nation is technically more of a progressive and liberal half, and they seem to be moving towards an age of acceptance and discovery. For a little bit of historical context here, sex work has always existed in the United States. We're a very young nation. If we take a look at the way that Christians talk about prostitutes in the 1800s, it's very similar, if not the same way that Christians talk about sex workers today. The United States has been trying to decide if sex work should be legal or not since the creation of our country. To this day, political bills are often proposed and sometimes even passed that allow for the legalization of sex work. Let's take a look at some primary sources here. The first primary source that I'd like to look at is titled She May Look Clean. It's an artist renditioning of a woman from the 1940s, and the point of the advertisement or image is to encourage men to stay focused on war and to not be distracted by women or prostitutes or sex workers. Here is our image here. And it reads, she may look clean, but, and then it reads that pickup girls, good time girls, and prostitutes, that they spread venereal diseases. You can't beat the Axis if you get venereal disease. And notice they're not calling it an STI. They're calling it a venereal disease. They're wanting to relate this to the woman. As if men don't get if men aren't prostitutes, or as if men don't have diseases as well. That's not really the only image, though. There's lots of images, particularly from that same time, that people have created to try to get this idea that you should be focused on war, you should be focused on other things. You can't focus on women or else you're going to get some kind of venereal disease. This one claims that 98% of women have a venereal disease. Why bet against those odds? I'd like to see their data about that. I'm not sure about that one. Here's another one that simply just says booby trap, syphilis, and gonorrhea. They're technically using sex to fight against sex here. They can't even get their mind straight. Do they like sex or do they not like sex? I thought that was kind of an interesting example. I also want to look at some other sources as well. One source in particular is by a man named William Barrett. His article is titled The Regulation of Prostitution. This article is from the late 1800s. Barrett was a health officer for the city of St. Louis, Missouri. He submitted a report about his views on how to deal with sex work in his city. While Barrett was against sex work and even calls it evil, quote, he accepts that it always existed and that it always will exist. So there was something kind of, he had some good foresight there, I would like to say. Because of this, he states the importance of regulation to protect the citizens from disease. He records a huge amount of data over the 2 years that he's in his position. That sex work was legalized in his area from 1870 to 1872. Yes, in St. Louis, Missouri. It didn't continue to be legalized after that, but it was just a small experiment. There's other people who also wanted to take a look at how they could deal with prostitution around this time. Comparing this to another man, Benjamin Orange Flower, he was also in favor of legalization of prostitution. However, he was really kind of ugly and rude about the way he talked about it. One thing that he did say that I thought was particularly interesting, though, is that he wrote, "We are assured that by licensing prostitution, we can restrict the evil to certain locations and better restrain it." I thought that was kind of interesting. It's kind of this concept of like, well, it has to exist, but not in my backyard. And that seems to happen a lot today as well, that people are like, well, I guess it can exist, but it doesn't allow to exist here. And actually, as of now, 2023, the only place in the United States where prostitution is legal is certain counties in Nevada. So Benjamin Orange Flowers, this author from the 1800s, kind of got his wish, this idea that it should be legal, but it should only be in a very specific location and restrained away from everyone. And you know, it is, we notoriously call Las Vegas Sin City. Although technically I think it's the areas outside of Vegas where it is legal. You know, so check your local laws before you go and doing anything over there. There's another article, primary source, that I wanted to take a look at, talking about, titled The Address to the Magdalene Society. This is also from the 1800s, from 1831 actually. It was a group of Christian women, mostly of middle or upper class, and they met to try to come up with some solutions of how to end prostitution. They didn't necessarily come up with literal solutions just yet, but they did have a big sense of wanting to help these people. And we actually still see this to this day. There are Christian groups that go out of their way to try to help women through prostitution. One that I found online that I thought was kind of interesting is titled Hookers for Jesus. And yeah, that's kind of a racy title, but I think they're kind of using the idea of like sex and advertising to sell their point. And I think that's really smart. Women using this, you know, to try to promote something good. So here's their website. This is Hookers for Jesus. But it's interesting, if we take a look at the language they use, we address the harmful effects of prostitution, sex trafficking, and sexual exploitation linked to pornography and the sex industry. We help women who have been negatively infected by the sex industry find hope, healing, and full restoration. This is a really nice progressive look that they have for these people. So I'm glad to see that the Christian society still does have people who are looking out for these members of society. Now to take a look at some secondary sources, I'd like to talk about Austin Surratt's and several of their colleagues' paper, which was titled Special Issue, Problematizing Prostitution, Critical Research and Scholarship. Surratt talks not only about the idea of how unregulated sex workers are put in danger from violent clients, higher rates of disease, abuse from management, and also talks heavily about the idea that sex work tends to be racist as much as it is sexist. Author Surratt explains how women of color are often incarcerated when white women are given some sort of form of reform as punishment. You know, so there seems to be unfair punishments for the same crimes. Looking at Britannica pro-con data over the last 40 years, we can see a huge upturn for the support of legal sex work. While only 24% supported legal sex work in 1978, that number's been steadily rising up to 49% in 2016. So we can see that there is a push for some more acceptance for this in our society. But however, change is slow. The more things change, the more things they often stay the same. Yeah, it's, I really wish that we had come a little bit farther than we have already, but we have a little bit more work to go. Thank you so much.